Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to another Blether with Heather. I'm Ali Heather, and this evening I'm joined with a cracking talent for the world of Scots screeving. Ross Sayers is the author of several works of young adult fiction, including last year's acclaimed novel, Sonny and Me. He's just about to bring out a new book that is entirely in Scots, not just the dialogue, the whole thing. And he's here to tell us all about it and the difficulties of launching a book in the coronavirus era. Good evening, Ross. How are you getting on?
Evening, Ali. I'm well. Yourself?
Aye, smashing. I think the applause is ringing out there. So tell us, first of all, tell us about this new book. What's it called and what's the general subject matter?
So the new book's called Daisy on the Outer Line. It tells the story of a young woman named Daisy. She's 19 years old. She's having a bit of a tough time of it. Her stepdad's just passed away. She wasn't really on great terms with him. This leads to a whole thing with her mum. She makes a whole scene at the funeral, and then that leads to her. She goes to her Christmas night out with her work the same night of the funeral. She then stumbles down to the subway. She misses the last subway, and then she meets a mysterious figure who tells her there's another subway coming just for her. She gets on it, she falls asleep. When she wakes up, she's in a different body, she's got a different face, and she's went back in time 16 days, and she has to figure out how to get back to the right timeline and to the right face.
How smashing a plot is that? Now, I have been dead lucky in that you sent us over the first chunk of chapters. Now the whole book, so I'm not sure how it ends. But I was struck first of all by how edgy, how kind of gritty it is. The big themes. There's nothing you're feared to take on at this level. It's been a long time since I've read young adult fiction, but there's a lot in there that's pretty close to the bane, I'd say. Tell us about that. How do you decide where the line is in terms of swearing, violence, alcohol abuse, difficult, like traumatic relationships, all that sort of stuff?
So I guess for me, I don't think it's up to me to draw the line. I write what I write, and I guess it's up to the publisher if they feel comfortable. I'm very lucky that my publisher, Cranachan, have been excellent with it. It's my opinion that if you're writing for young adults, a lot of people have that in their mind that they're still kids, but they're not really, they're adults. That's why they call it young adult. I think when you're growing up, all you want to do is read stuff you shouldn't be reading. So if you're, when you get to age 15, you don't just be like, all right, I can only watch 15 films now. I'm not going to watch 18s because they're not for me. All you want to do is watch the films that you shouldn't be watching, read the books that you're told they're too old for you. So once you get to when you're writing for 15, 16, 17-year-olds, they're ready for adult fiction, and so you need to prove that your books are sort of worth staying in the young adult genre for. So for me, I don't really hold back. I write the books with as much swearing as it feels right, and yeah, I guess it's up to the parents. But I teenagers, that's all they speak in is swearing. So if I didn't write it, it wouldn't be realistic, and I think they would just toss it for another book.
Aye, so I was a wee bit of pure clutching my pearls when I first read it, and you tell me, well, hold on, Hunger Games is young adult fiction, and that's way wilder. That's about pure bairns hunting other bairns or something.
Aye, it's pretty much like teenagers hunting each other for sport, but I guess because it doesn't have any, it doesn't have when people get shot, they say, oh, you're a beastie. They don't actually swear for some reason. And because of that, they have that sort of mental barrier that, oh, that's fine. They're being killed, but no one's swearing. Swearing is the worst. And I guess people don't really think about it. They think young adult, no swearing, but the themes can be darker. Whereas I just think go for it.
Aye, no,
I've been lucky enough that I've been able to do that.
You've prepared a wee reading to give the audience at home. Just a wee glisk into what Daisy on the Outer Line's all about. Now, this bit doesn't have any swearies in it, so you didn't have to clap your hands over the bairn's lugs or anything at home. But if you'd like to give us just a wee introduction and a reading for the book, that'd be smashing.
Yep. So this is when she's stumbled into the Cowcaddon subway station. She's missed the last subway. A subway worker has come down and told her she needs to get out. and he'll give her a couple of minutes to like compose herself, and she sort of just sits down on the subway platform. And this is her as she meets this mysterious figure. As I'm reading a poster for some fancy opera at the concert hall, the lights go out above me. Done. One city lights out. Done. And another. Soon I'm sat in near darkness, the light for the top of the stairs not quite able to creep into the far corners down here. Hello! I shout. My voice echoes off the curved walls like a penny swirling down a charity box. At the end of the platform is a door. Clang. The door opens and somebody steps out. Another clang as the door shuts and the figure starts coming towards me. Hello? I say, making a valiant attempt to stand up. I was just about to go, I swear. The figure, still too dark for me to see properly, starts speaking. You like this, Shin, it says, still a shadow halfway down the platform. What do donkeys at Blackpool Beach get for their lunch? As the figure comes within spitting distance, I can just about make out their features. An older wife, white hair streaming all the way to her belt buckle. What? I ask. I said, she repeats. What do the donkeys at Blackpool Beach get for their lunch? The question ricochets against the walls and chases my shout down the dark tunnels. I don't know. She smiles. A half hour, same as everybody else. Now the platform is alive with the sound of this wife's laughter. Her body shakes with the exertion and light fae naywar seems to reflect off her vest. Her head tilts back and her horns slide into her pockets. She seems to exist out of this time, out of this place. This isn't how you act at the end of your shift on a Friday night on a dark subway platform. Do you get it? She says. It's no a bestion, mind you, but it's better than nothing. Better than sitting here in silence like you were doing, no offence intended. You are sitting here in the dark on your Todd, in case you didn't notice. I gave her a chuckle. Aye, it's no bad. From inside her fleece, she produces a wee electric lamp. She turns it on and places it on the ground, bathing us in a sharp white light. She shoots a horn out at me. I'm Yotta, she says. It's a pleasure to meet me, I'm sure. Yotta? That's correct. Y-O-T-T-A. It's a unique name, and you'll remember it, won't you? If I tell you my name was Alison, you'd have already forgotten it by now. I mean, Alison's an alright name, but let's be honest, parents that name their child Alison didn't get past the first chapter in the baby name book. Do you get what I'm saying? Cool. I'm Daisy. Nice to meet you, Daisy. Good thing you're not called Alison, or we'd have ourselves a wee awkward moment here. We shake. There's something interesting when I touch her, some feeling I can't put my finger on. Something I've no felt it for, like when you meet a celebrity and they have that aura that normal folk don't. Your colleague wasn't best pleased with me, I say. Colleague? The guy who went up the stairs? She shrugs. Nah, I'm new here. Usually you'd find me at HQ. This is a different kind of shift from what I'm used to. Right, well, I better clear off before you shut up for the night. Yotta steps to the edge of the platform, her black steel-capped boots resting on the raised bumps for visually impaired folk. She stares down into the tunnel, into the darkness. You'd be as well sticking around, Daisy, she says. There'll be another one along in a minute. There's Iwies in their train to catch down here. Like clockwork. That's what they call it, eh? The Clockwork Orange. I don't know who they are, but apparently some folk call it that. Thanks very much for listening. That's a wee taster.
Honestly, man, that for folk at home, that's exactly the vibe of the book. It's a smashing energy. It's a wee bit kind of chaotic and unsettling, and it's dead funny. Like it's a really folk that follow you on Twitter. Okay, you've got a joke in you, but the book is just stacked full of them. So it is young adult, and as you said, most folks see that as like for being the younger folk. But I'll certainly be reading that when it comes out because it's a laugh, because it's good. And the reason I suppose that we're here haying this Blether together is because they hail things in Scots. So your last book, Sonny and Me, came out last year, and it received praise for haying the dialogue in Scots. And I was reading some of the dialogue in Scots, and I was seeing any of your interviews done around about the time, and you said, didn't want to quote like you're in court here, you said that it's Sonny and Me was written in medium Scots, and you think there's a bit of a stigma around using it, and you wanted your next book to be in full Scots. So tell us about, first of all, what the difference is between the two stages, the two powers of Scots.
Well, firstly, thanks very much for the kind words. That's really nice of you. I'll put you down for 8 copies. That should be enough. It's like when I was writing Sonny and Me, I guess part of me feels that a bit nervous to call it full Scots, and I don't know. I must have said that in an interview and probably regretted it. because I think for Sunny Me and for Daisy on the Outer Line, I think if you're like a Scots purist, you'll read that and you'll think, that's no Scots, that's not enough Scots. That you're using loads of English words in there. Whereas I think if this is your first venture into any Scots writing, you're going to think it's crazy. Like, so particularly I would say, because Sunny Me got stock throughout the UK, which was great, but I did get a lot of, even people that weren't familiar with Scots considered it to be quite tricky. That was generally the first comment, was it's tricky to get into, but once you get the hang of it, it's decent. Decent. So
high praise indeed.
They said it's readable. It's readable. Give it to the charity shop. So I guess when I'm writing, I'm keen to use Scots, but I'm also not wary, but I'm also aware of the fact that, particularly writing for young adults, I'm very aware that this could be a teenager's first book that they've read like this. So, I mean, if they've read Trainspotting, this is probably a lot easier than that for them. But for a lot of them, I'm guessing it's probably maybe their first venture into it. So I try to write a sort of, maybe a hybrid that walks that line, that you listen to me reading it out and it seems very Scots, but on the page hopefully it's maybe a bit easier to read than some other Scots. So I don't know if the purists probably think that's Scots enough, but the people that are no familiar with Scots probably think it's.
I know, it's an interesting sentiment here there, but I've heard Scots purists saying Rabbie Burns didn't use enough Scots and or more English spellings in his poetry and all that sort of stuff. So but you are the opinion that you hate to be loyal to the audience. Eh? You hate to be thinking of them when you're putting the words down on page, like how do I bring them a line in the story at all? So if you did hate that tension, we, Sonny and me, and now with Daisy on the Outer Line, how come you're using Scots at all if it's a risk that folks go, Christ, I can't read that, I'll put it down?
I guess probably part of it is that I guess I got the bug in my first book, Mary's Name. I had it was mainly just dialogue, because the little girl didn't speak in Scots all that much. It was mainly her grandpa, and like he would do that thing that you get adults in Scotland doing. He would say to her, "Don't you like get my bad habits?" Because a lot of people consider, like, if you speak Scots, it's like a bad habit, and you're not going to get a job interview speaking like that. So I got the bug, and I wanted to keep going, because I guess part of me just thinks that there's not enough out there, and for teenagers, especially Scottish teenagers, they just don't see themselves on the page enough. And I think that was the same when I was in high school. It just felt like everything was American. To be American, like, it had to be good, it had to be probably American, and Scottish stuff wasn't as good. So I guess I'm trying to carve out a wee niche for myself, because I don't think there's too many other Scottish writers writing like original young adult books particularly with Scottish teenagers in mind. So I guess I just saw a gap in the market, and tiny gap in the market, but I've decided that's going to be my niche for the time being.
Aye. So it's funny you should mention your own experiences, because when we were hearing a Blether in advance of this, you were telling us that your face Stirling and your father was quite a braid Scots speaker, but he'd been a bit of a language police around the house, telling you no to use certain words. What was your own experience growing up with the Scots?
I feel like it's a lot of Scottish folk go through the same thing, in that everyone seems to use Scots all around you, and apart from in a professional setting, that's when it's like frowned upon. And then like 1 week a year, for Burns Night, you're told Scots is great, she's speaking Scots as much as possible, and then as soon as that week's done, that's it. And there'll be people in your life, there'll be adults in your life, I think, when you're growing up, and some of them will be totally speaking Scots, and some of them will give you that sort of feedback of you don't use that like on a daily basis. Like, but then I feel like some people have, like, they have rules for one thing and rules for another bit of Scots. So we had a music teacher, and sometimes she was like really defend Scots. So when we used to sing Old Lang Syne, if anyone said Old Lang Syne, and if anyone said Old Lang Syne, she would like chastise them for saying that's how the Americans say it. We don't say it like that. And yet, if anyone ever used the word use in her class, she would like stop the class and be like, use isn't a word. Don't don't use. So that's why all my books tend to have use in it. But yeah, I feel like there's just all these different sort of opinions everyone has about Scots, and even within certain people, they'll think some Scots is acceptable and they'll think some isn't. So it's just about, I guess, you get to an age and you decide for yourself what if you're going to let that. If you're gonna let that put you off using Scots, if people are going to judge it, or whether you're just going to say that's their problem.
Christ, it isn't easy, is it? It isn't easy at all. In terms of walking about a minefield there. So, one of the things that can cause folk to move away from using Scots in professional settings is portrayals in the media where Scots speakers can sometimes be made to be a bit glaikit, and they're shown to be glaikit by partly their use of Scots. So, I mean, we've seen it in the film Brave, where the only boy in it that speaks Scots is this incomprehensible character from the northeast. Something I really liked about Daisy on the Outer Line was the poor creator Robbie. So just for the audience at home, Robbie is this guy. He matches with Daisy on Tinder. Thinks he's I can't say what he thinks he's getting, but he thinks he's getting something. he thinks he's on the money with her, and it turns out that she's only taken him out, so she's got somebody to take to the Purvey after the funeral, or mum's boyfriend. And so poor old Robbie comes along. Now, he gets into trouble because he doesn't ken what Purvey means. So he's got no idea where he's going. And he doesn't really speak Scots. He's about the only person in the whole Purvey that isn't speaking Scots. And he's made out to be a bit of a gowk. Are you using a Scots book to mock somebody for no kenning Scots in a kind of reversal of the old dichotomy, the old rules?
I mean, I wish I could say that was intentional, and from now on I will say it's intentional. No, it was really part of it was, like you were saying earlier, like I'm aware that this might be people's first venture into Scots, so it's sort of to hold their hand and say, listen, you might not know what a Purvey is, because personally I didn't know what a Purvey was until about 5 years ago, and someone in my creative writing class wrote a story about a Purvey, and it wasn't until I read it that I knew what that was. So yeah, it's about, I like to have a bit of fun with it, but that was really, I guess, poking fun at myself, but also saying to the readers, listen, if you're struggling, because there's no a glossary at the back, and there's no any footnotes, so you're like, I guess I'm throwing you in the deep end, I suppose. So it was sort of to be a sort of like hand-holding exercise. Listen, if you don't know what this word is, I'll clear it up for you here.
Oh, it's awfully good, yeah. Gain folk at home that. Like if you didn't ken what that means, loads of folk didn't. Okay, no bother. So folk at home can empathise with Robbie, just like I did. Poor soul, dodgy Tinder dates in my time. So talking about like your own background a wee bit, like you went through the creative writing masters at Stirling Uni. Mm-hmm. Were you taught explicitly on that course how to produce good Scots writing, or were you left to your own devices? What role did Scots play in that?
I would say, I suppose I'd be a bit left to your own devices, but it was entirely up to you what you wrote. If you wanted to write poetry, you go write poetry. If you wanted to write short stories, if you wanted to write novels, and they would help you with whatever form you wanted to write in. They would help you with that. So if you wanted to write Scots, that was no bother. They would just help you the best they could, try and help you bring the best out of your Scots. I don't think there was anyone there I know, because a lot of the lecturers tend to change over a lot. I don't think there was anyone there at the time that was particularly encouraging, but there certainly wasn't anyone discouraging. It was entirely up to you. But back then I was a bit sort of nervous to use Scots because I'd never really done it before, and there were other people in my class that were writing Scots really well, and I thought, oh god, this is going to be embarrassing if I have my first effort and they rip it apart.
Tense. It's no easy to make that journey. So one of the things that folk think about Scots is you can't publish it, you can't write in it because you'll not make any money out of it. Am I right in thinking, so this book was in part funded by the Scots Language Publication Grant, which is I think about 30k a year that the Scottish Government give to publishers to help new books in Scots come out. You get about £5,000 for per book. Am I right in thinking that this book is mere Scots thanks to that money? So there's now a financial imperative to actually produce more work in Scots.
Yep, that's true. I'd written I was about halfway through writing it, and I was writing it sort of maybe the same amount of Scots that was putting into Sunny and Me, and then we applied for the funding, and miraculously we got the funding, and it was like, all right, you need to have it needs to be 70% in Scots, and so I had to like bulk it up. So it was sort of it was, on the one hand, I was given free rein to write as much Scots as I wanted, but at the same time, I was also like I didn't really have much choice. It had to be 70%. But yeah, like, so essentially the book would have existed without it, but it certainly wouldn't have existed the way it came out in the end.
That's smashing. I mean, it's a sign of a success of this publication grant. What a lot of folk at the time said, what are we meant to do with that? There's wee Bobby's 30 grand. That'll no make any kind of difference. But here we are now, looking at a new book coming out in Scots. We're just about out of time. So one last thing I'd like to finish with. What do you think young Ross Sayers would have made of this? Had you come across this at 14-year-old? Know that confident maybe in your own kind of Scots at school and all that. If you'd come to school and just were able to study in English, Daisy on the Outer Line or something like it, what do you think you would have made of it?
I probably thought it was terrible. I was too busy watching Scrubs and Only Fools and Horses. No, I think I would have liked. I think I would have really liked it. Obviously, I'm not going to say I would have hated it. I guess.
Like, would it have made any difference to your perceptions of your own language and culture?
I suppose I liked it. I would have taken it home and been like, because I don't remember ever taking a book home and saying, "Look, Mum, Dad, look, this is all in Scots, and it's got a swearing in it. This is great." But then I think young me would have probably, like, I'm quite proud of the plot of this one. There's a lot of, because time travel is something I really like, and I like it and like when things, like, you get to the end and you realise that something that happened before, like, is going to pay off, and someone that did something at this point, it like comes full circle. So I've tried to fit in as many little time travel Easter eggs as possible. So I like to think that young me would have been on the message boards, like, talking about it. Not that message boards for books really exist, but.
And so the last thing I'm going to leave on this. Thanks very much for speaking to us. It was really enjoyable. I loved the intro to the book. The big question on Abdi's lips: where can I buy
it? You can get it on Amazon. Obviously, we don't really want to encourage Amazon, but it's on Amazon if that's easier for you. But it's also direct from the publisher, Cranachan Publishing, Waterstones, Foils, Blackwells. It's all online at the minute, and then I don't know who is going to stock it, but hopefully as many places as possible. But it's definitely online. I think if you buy it from Amazon, you won't get like the special, like, raised lettering fancy copy. So stick with Cranachan or Waterstones or like a reputable bookshop.
For that lovely
independent bookshop.
That's what it's all about.
I mean, I'm rolling in it anyway, so it's not different to me.
They cushions look fair expensive behind you there.
No comment. I don't even have a lamp to put on. No, I was going to put the lamp on, but I didn't want to leave the seat.
No,
really dark with it.
Cheers very much, man. It's great. I'm sure the book's going to be a great success. And I'll just leave the audience at home with a wee reminder that you can now go to scotslanguageawards.com and make nominations for the folk, the organisation, the school, hundreds of different awards up there that you think have done a real effort over the last year to make a difference for the Scots lead in general. You can vote for Ross here if you fancy. You can nominate anybody you like to fill up their categories and make sure that the folk that deserve recognition get that recognition come the awards in October. But that's all for me for just now. We'll see you again 7 p.m. next Thursday, where I was speaking to the screever and oar setter Ashley Douglas. I'll see you then.